Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And for 36 years, I used living history and historical reenactment to bring the subject to life for my students in the classroom. Well, I'm not in the classroom anymore, so that means I had to find a use for all the garb that I have at home that I don't want to get rid of, because I can't bear to part with it. And I decided to explore parts of history that I didn't get to teach. So being in California, I started off with the California missions and the Asistencias and the Presidios, and that led to a chance discovery that there were, bandidos that used to hang out in saloons that were made in the secularized missions, and that was really intriguing. So I've been doing a series called Chasing Bandidos and Lawmen, and I decided I'd cover a couple of local for me. I'm in Pomona, so local boys. These are a couple of outlaws that were in the Los Angeles area, and they were the brothers Santos and Francisco Sotelo. Oh, and there's also Miguel, but he's kind of an afterthought. So I'm going to follow their careers, and I hope you stick with me on this journey. The Sotelo family lived in Los Angeles County. Let's just say LA. Apparently there were 5 brothers in all, but only 3 names come to light. Santos, who was born in 1851, would later start calling himself Chico Lugo. Francisco, around 1858, used the name Francisco Olivas after his brushes with the law. And then there was Miguel, who may have been the oldest and was a convicted horse thief, sentenced from Los Angeles County to serve 5 years at San Quentin, which he did from November 1869 to February of 1874 as inmate 4270. He was reported to have been, according to one newspaper account, a member of Tiburcio Vasquez's gang. But if he was, it could only have been for a very brief time during Vasquez's time in Los Angeles, for Vasquez was arrested in May of that year and executed the following one. More on Miguel later. Now it was time for the other Sotelo brothers to have a brush with the law. In June of 1876, Francisco was having an issue with a cousin, Ramon Tapia Sotelo, where one insulted the other, and Francisco was knocked to the ground by Ramon. That night, Ramon attended the funeral of a friend in Los Angeles' notorious Negro Alley. Later, Ramon was navigating a narrow passage in the alley. 2 shots rang out, and Ramon dropped dead. Now, in spite of a pretty extensive manhunt, Francisco Sotelo could not be found. Later, his horse ended up returning to Los Angeles, and so it was assumed that he had probably stolen a fresh one and was hiding out in the San Bernardino Mountains until it was safe to return. Well, it wasn't really good for him. So what ended up happening is his brother Santos ended up meeting up with him, and he brought along a friend named Jose Tapia, who would now become a part of their gang. In January of 1877, Santos, who was just 26 years old, and Francisco, who was just 19, decided that robbing stages would become their career. On January 6th, their new career had begun. The stagecoach from Darwin to Mojave was in Kern County's Red Rock Canyon. They stepped out with masks and guns and robbed the stage of the Wells Fargo Express box, then went through the passengers. They fled into the Tehachapi Mountains, confident nobody would follow their trail. Their next target would be at the border of the 5-year-old Ventura County. It had just split off from Santa Barbara County, and Los Angeles County, along the route of the Portola expedition. So 2 weeks after their first robbery, it's like January 20th, um, Santos and Francisco Sotelo and their partner Jose Tapia end up holding up the New Hall to Ventura stage. And that was actually pretty easy to do because there was basically one road in the area. You have hills, and then you have the Santa Clara River. So there's that one road. So it was pretty easy to pick off the stage. They secured the Wells Fargo Express box and probably celebrated at a Mexican cantina near Elizabeth Lake by present-day Lake Hughes. Making their way over the Tehachapis again, they went to a Mexican settlement near Bakersfield that was called Panama. The Bandidos added Francisco Romero to the gang. Apparently Tapia was out. And promptly stole a string of 6 horses from an isolated ranch. Then on February 25th, the gang stopped at a store on the edge of the now long gone Tulare Lake. They robbed the store owner, S.A. Lovell, of $500 and some goods and then beat him unconscious. So the outlaws are heading south, and they're driving their string of horses that they've stolen, and what ends up happening is around Bakersfield, maybe south of Bakersfield, there's some canal workers that spotted them and recognized the horses. Well, now a shootout starts. And nobody gets hurt, but what ends up happening is the Sotelos end up riding into the Tehachapis, and they're being pursued by a posse. What also ends up happening is Romero, he's the new guy, he ends up having to abandon his horse and he tries to disappear into the brush. Returning to Bakersfield with the recovered stock, Bloodworth and the posse were back in the saddle the following morning, relentlessly pursuing the Bandidos. They captured Romero and sent him back to Bakersfield and pressed on, but the trail had grown too cold. Stopping for a meal at the ranch of George Reed, the posse entered the house to find Reed with a bullet in his head and the house ransacked. The posse had little doubt as to who the culprits were. After a brief rest, Bloodworth and his men joined the Kern County Sheriff in further pursuit. Tapia, the former gang member, meanwhile had been captured. The Bandido brothers did not pass up other opportunities to rob, even while they were pursued. On March 2nd, they tied up some 14 Chinese miners in San Francisco Canyon, the site of the 1842 gold rush, and got away with $260 in gold dust. A posse led by ex-sheriff Robert H. Bob Paul, who normally was a messenger, that's the guy who rides shotgun on a stage, for the Wells Fargo run between Mojave and Lone Pine, kept pressure on the two fugitives. Now, acting on a tip in April, a posse which included San Bernardino law enforcement, they end up going into a valley in the San Bernardino Mountains because they've heard that the Sotelos are there. And what ends up happening is they end up finding Francisco, and he's caught completely unawares. He basically surrenders because even though he's got 2 pistols in his belt, he can't draw them, and he knows it's over. The posse then went to a cantina where Santos was reportedly attending a fandango. He was there, but he was clean shaven, and so escaped into the night unrecognized. All right, let's get to the trials. Pleading guilty in Los Angeles to robbing the New Hall stage, that was the second robbery, Jose Tapia was sentenced to 7 years in San Quentin. He was admitted on March 21st, 1877 as inmate 7463. However, his sentence was commuted and he was released on December 21st, 1881, after only serving 4 years and 9 months. Francisco Sotelo, that's his mugshot, was also tried in Los Angeles for stage robbery and sentenced to 10 years. He entered San Quentin on May 29, 1877 as inmate 7602. Although his identity was known, he was, for some reason, admitted under the name Francisco Olivas. Lots of inmates were admitted under different names. And he was released on November 20th, 1883 because his sentence had expired. However, he went back in 1886 for grand larceny to serve a 3-year sentence as inmate 12090. Francisco Romero, that was the new guy that was caught by Constable Harry Bloodworth and sent back to Bakersfield. He was sent to Tulare County, where he was tried for the robbery of the Lovell store at Lake Tulare and was given a 5-year term, arriving at San Quentin as inmate 4647. Santos Sotelo once again fled into the Tehachapi Mountains, but he was tracked down and captured 3 months after Francisco. A young man saw Santos under a tree smoking a cigarette, snuck up on him, and took him prisoner. Sotelo was taken to Los Angeles, then later transferred to Kern County, which probably means Bakersfield, where he was tried and convicted of robbing the Darwin stage. He talked freely of his exploits and was easily convicted, receiving a term of 15 years at San Quentin as inmate 7763, but only ended up serving 10. As a footnote, Miguel Sotelo, who had served at San Quentin until 1874, was shot and killed in June of 1878 in Verdugo Canyon, Los Angeles County, while resisting arrest by Sheriff Mitchell and Deputy Adolph Solis. So, the 4 members of the Sotelo gang, they're all sitting in San Quentin, and Miguel Sotelo dies in a shootout. So, the end of that gang story. I'm gonna be tracking down other bandidos and outlaws and following the careers of different lawmen in the series, and I hope you stick with me as I continue my journey. Oh, and it'd be really nice if you subscribe to the channel.